This video is made by Sisters Uncut, South East London, a feminist direct action group fighting cuts to domestic violence services.
Between 2010 and 2015, the Tory government cut local government funding by 51%, meaning 34 specialist refuge services, mostly BME services, have had to close. Under Theresa May, the Tories plan to cut this funding by a further 30% by 2020.
Theresa May voted to restrict the scope of legal aid. In 2012, the Tories brought in something called LASPO, the Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act, which decimated legal aid. In the year after LASPO was introduced, the number of cases granted legal aid was cut by 46%.
Under Theresa May, the Tory government has introduced oppressive housing policies, including cuts to housing benefits for 16 to 21-year-olds. These cuts make it harder for young people to leave an abusive relationship or abusive household and go into a safe, supported accommodation. Young queer people face additional barriers to leaving an abusive relationship, such as threats of being outed or fear of homophobia from non-specialist domestic violence services. Trans women face additional violence just because they are trans and frequently find themselves unable to access mainstream domestic violence services.
Under Theresa May, the Tory government has pushed through a programme of ideological austerity. Research has shown that low-income women and women of colour will feel the effects of austerity most of all. The financial impact that this will have on women and non-binary survivors is that they will have less money with which to leave an abusive partner or household, and therefore will be more at risk of violence.
Theresa May extended the contract for Serco to run Yarlswood, despite allegations about abuse, sexual exploitation, rape and self-harm at the centre in Bedfordshire. Yarlswood is a detention centre where women and children who do not have the right to stay in the UK can be indefinitely detained pending deportation.
Theresa May's immigration policies target migrant sisters and prevent them from accessing services. Under her leadership, private landlords have been turned into border agents, forcing them to run checks on the immigration status of tenants. The Home Office has also ordered NHS professionals to report anyone without leave to remain in the UK to the authorities. Many migrant women and non-binary people are now afraid to use the NHS, even during pregnancy.
22 women died in prison during 2016, the highest number ever recorded, while Theresa May plans to build 4 new super prisons. 46% of women in prison report having suffered domestic violence, and 53% of women in prison report having experienced emotional, physical or sexual abuse during childhood. Cuts to support services mean more women end up in the criminal justice system.
Theresa May has consistently voted to cut disability benefits and refuses to rule out further cuts. Disabled women are twice as likely to experience domestic violence. These benefits are their lifeline. Without them, they could be unable to leave, and this puts their lives at risk. Recent reassessments for disabled people have been traumatic and intrusive. People have had their disability benefits cut because of appointment letters not being sent. People have had their own specialist evidence ignored, and fabricated evidence has been used against them. These cuts cost survivors' lives.
Under Theresa May, the Conservative government introduced the rape clause, requiring survivors of rape to fill out a form disclosing their abuse to claim tax credits. The form requires women to sign a legal declaration confirming their child was conceived without consent and that they are not living with the child's other parent in order to claim tax credits for a third child. The form is 8 pages long and requires a third-party professional to verify that you were raped.
Theresa May has frequently voted against LGBT rights, putting LGBT survivors at risk. Theresa May voted against the repeal of Section 28, which banned councils from intentionally promoting homosexuality within their schools or other areas of their work. In practice, it deprived a generation of queer youth from a proper education on personal, social, relationship and health issues. 3/4 of LGBT survivors are turned away when they try to access services.
Theresa May and her cabinet inflict state violence against women and non-binary people by removing the vital lifelines of specialist domestic violence services, refuges, welfare support, access to housing and legal aid, by making healthcare and housing unsafe for migrant survivors, by incarcerating women in prisons and detention centres. Theresa May is no sister of ours.